Assi could have been one of the most powerful courtroom dramas of the decade. Instead, it chooses propaganda over storytelling, and that's why this film frustrates me more than it angers me. It is a film that had the potential to be a good film, even a great film that tackles some extremely sensitive and important issues in a nuanced and tactful manner, but it is held back by the very simple fact that the entire film is buried under a mountain of political propaganda and ideological drivel that ultimately brings it down. There are at least two gripping narratives contained within Assi, but unfortunately the filmmakers were more preoccupied with making a political statement than compelling cinema, ultimately leading to a total mess of a film which acts as an ideological vehicle for the filmmakers' worldviews and a propaganda piece for the liberal leftist critics to hail as their new champion. Some housekeeping: I refuse to censor certain words or replace them with silly alternatives for the sake of the YouTube algorithm, considering the seriousness of the subject matter and out of respect for the victims. So obviously this video will not be encouraged by the platform, so please subscribe, like and share if you would like to see more honest opinion. Plot synopsis: Assi tells the tale of Parima, a Kerala woman working as a school teacher in North India, played by Kani Kusruti, who is brutally and mercilessly gang raped by a group of men while returning home at night, and the efforts of Ravi, played by Tapasi Pannu, a lawyer who takes up her case in the face of a flawed legal system burdened by the corruption and misconduct of the officers investigating. As per Wikipedia, the narrative explores the themes of legal struggle, societal silence and gender-based issues through an intense courtroom drama setting, which is partially correct in the sense that the film is more concerned about making a political statement rather than, making a good film. You know what? So in keeping with the film's own priorities, before talking about the actual film, let's take a step back for a second and take a closer look at the political statement that the film is so eager to convey. I will have links to all of my sources in the description, and feel free to point out any mistakes I might make in the comments. To address the elephant in the room, is this a propaganda film? In some ways, no. It is not a film that is singularly concerned with depicting a narrative where all men are the bad guys or NPCs and all women are the good guys or victims. Well, not at its core at least. Sure, there are some throwaway lines about the female struggle in the male oppressed world or whatever, but there are some well developed male and female characters. That being said, in terms of misrepresenting factual data to push a certain political and ideological narrative, yes, this film is 100% propaganda. In a nutshell, the film is a meditation on rape culture in India, or at least that's what the film aspires to be. Rape culture, for the unaware, is a term coined by feminists to describe a society where rape is celebrated, normalized or tolerated. Now, I personally do not believe we live in such a society, but we can argue in the comments if I'm wrong about this. Regardless, the film provides, at least at a glance, a very factually verifiable number to counter my claim. Assi, or 80 per day, the title of the film, refers to the count of 80 rapes occurring per day in India. This is actually a very grievous number in all seriousness, but it's a bit misleading in isolation and intentionally framed and presented as such to provoke an emotional response. See, the number is arrived by taking the total number of women raped in the nation per year, close to around 30,000, and dividing it by 365 to get to 80 victims per day approximately. Still a frightening number on the face of it, but presented without the per capita context, it becomes a marketing weapon rather than any form of analysis. See, we have to take into consideration the fact that we are living in the second most populated country in the world with close to 1.5 billion people, and when you think about it, as bad as it sounds, it is a pretty small number, especially when you compare the per capita rape metrics from other countries against India, which would show that India is not even in the top 30. In fact, the so-called first world nations like the US and UK, even Switzerland, the happy place, rank much higher in this list. I know it sounds a bit insensitive to downplay this number, but the film was more than eager to throw this number at everyone's faces in its sensationalized marketing campaign, so I think it's more than fair for me to rein back on the embellishment. And yes, the number 80 per day is still very high, 100%, I agree with that. Ideally, even half of it or even 10 would be too much, especially considering our flawed justice system that the movie takes its time to highlight as well. See, India has a rape conviction rate less than 30%, and that is a number which is more significant and something that the movie kind of fails to highlight. Also, the movie, despite its perceived moral high ground, at some point considers rape and murder to be equivalent crimes, which I thoroughly disagree with on a fundamental logical basis. See, a criminal can, by some logic, even a twisted one, find some way to defend murder, as in I need to get this person out of the way for any specific reason. But rape is completely different. There is no reason for rape other than to commit an act of evil. It is a purely heinous act of malice inflicted for one's pleasure at the expense of another's pain. So if a criminal is proved to be a rapist beyond a shadow of a doubt, I believe they should be punished to a much more torturous extent. And that is the key phrase here, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Back to the numbers 80 and 30%. Why would the conviction rates be so low despite the high reporting? Could it be that this is the total number of cases filed, including the false cases. India does have a notoriously high false rape statistic, with the numbers ranging between 10 and 50% in some states. There is also the fact that the Indian legal system exclusively treats women with kid gloves, with even consensual relationships that turn sour being treated as rape. Hell, there is a separate category in our legal system of rape under the false promise of marriage, which is like the opposite of female empowerment, treating women like kids and not adults who can make and live by the consequences of their own judgment, poor though it may be. If you're still not convinced about the issue of false rape cases, please take your time to watch India's Sons. It is a very illuminating documentary on the same topic. You will see the actual data that the mainstream won't even share. I know that at least some of you folks are thinking that I'm some kind of misogynist or a male chauvinist right now, so let me just give you another number. There are approximately 28,000 murders which are committed per year in India, which approximates to around 76 murders per day. Does that mean that India has a murder culture as well? So if you are feeling particularly dense about it, we can go down the statistical rabbit hole as well, using per capita and reported cases and everything. But ultimately the fact of the matter is this: you can do the same for any other crime in India. We will be at the top of it based on total numbers alone, considering our population. I would still have forgiven the film for this particular political talking point involving numbers, were it not so aggressive in pushing this narrative to the extent that the screen goes red every 20 minutes to remind you that there has been one more incident happening in the time. This feels like a cheap knockoff of what Dhurandhar has already done, down to the color choice. Never mind the fact that this becomes tiresome after a while. And I do believe that even if the numbers were to come down, the film would still be pushing whatever the reduced number might be. Even if it's 20 per day, the screen would light up red every 1 hour instead of 20. My point is, whatever the number may be, it would still be high considering the seriousness of the crime, and it will still be sensational when you present it with the intention of sensationalism and fear mongering. So to conclude, why is this film, and more importantly so many of us, so adamant about insisting that we have a rape culture when we clearly don't, as shown by the statistics? Well, there are a multitude of reasons: preconceived political biases, brown guilt, shipboy mentality, virtue signaling, luxury beliefs, take your pick. But as far as mainstream media is concerned, this is just sensationalized yellow journalism and social media scaremongering tactics manifesting in the world of cinema to make the film seem more important or more relevant to sell more tickets. Same tactics deployed allegedly by films like Mardani and Kerala Story, a misrepresentation of facts and a distortion of reality to hijack and over dramatize real world horrors simply to sell more tickets. And I will not stand for that. This film is stuffed with other misguided political talking points as well. There is an entire section dedicated to tackling dark humor and rape jokes, trolls and memes in the aftermath of the incident, which is kind of ironic considering the same ideological wing seeking compassion and empathy and sympathy for such issues are the same ones who post Charlie Kirk memes online on a daily basis. Look, my view on dark humor is this: either everything is okay or nothing is okay. We can't pick and choose which jokes are okay and which are not based on your ideological biases alone. And then there is the usual barrage of cliched leftist talking points peppered throughout: why can't women go out at night, think of the kids, feelings over facts, the usual. There is this one very hilarious scene where the friendly policeman gets drunk and starts fights with the witness in his failure to catch the criminals, and Tapasi's Pannu's character sees this and remarks, and I paraphrase here: if us women wanted to lash out, the whole world will turn to ashes. Yeah, let's move on. So that's all about the flawed political statement that the film tries to make. What about the actual film then? But before that, feel free to correct me in the comments. I'm just a guy who talks about films, not a political pundit or something, so I could be totally wrong with whatever I said here. Well, back to the movie, and let's start with the positive. Sure, the film has an ideologically driven main plot, fine, it's not for me, but as the film progresses, a side plot emerges, one involving a vigilante, the umbrella killer, who starts hunting down the actual criminals involved in the case. It starts off as a smaller side plot, and I initially found it to be a needless distraction from the main plot, but as the film progresses, it becomes more and more compelling and becomes more of a parallel plot itself, if not fully developed, and there are too many holes in this narrative for me, but ultimately ended up being more engaging than the main plot, primarily due to the fact that it asks a lot of thought-provoking questions, the type you expect from a good Batman comic or something, such as: is the vigilante doing it to avenge the victims or for his own misguided sense of pleasure-driven morality? Should he be celebrated? Why should he be celebrated? Is he responsible for creating more crime than he actually solves? Does this actually solve the problem of the justice system? And many, many more. But those have spoilers, so let me just stop there. The most important point about this particular side plot is this: the film doesn't exactly lecture or preach to you or make emotional arguments about the politics of this. It provides various perspectives of the vigilante situation and asks you to make your own decision about how you actually feel about this. The vigilante subplot actually made me realize that the filmmaker Anubhav Sinha is a really effective filmmaker, and if he chooses to focus on making compelling cinema instead of turning it into a vehicle for his political views, we could have got a very compelling main plot as well. But alas, wasted potential. Next, the film looks amazing. Excellent cinematography and production design all around. The performances as well. Look, I don't like Tapasi Pannu the activist, but Tapasi Pannu the actress is always a joy to watch, and so are the other leading characters. The actual antagonists feel a bit replaceable, but the criminal lawyer on the other side is the scenery chewing Rahman Daket's borderline over the top character, who is a joy to watch as well. So those are a few positives. As for the negatives, I have already gone into detail about the political falsehoods of the movie. You can agree or disagree with that, but what can't be disagreed with is the simple fact that this film is an atrocious courtroom drama. The courtroom drama fails because the prosecution relies on moral outrage rather than legal strategy, and in a real courtroom, emotion without evidence collapses immediately. In fact, the courtroom drama sequences are so bad that it makes the antagonist look like they are on the right side by the end of the film, even though they are not. See, even a stupid 12-year-old could clearly see through the futile emotional arguments of Ravi, Tapasi Pannu's protagonist lawyer character, against the antagonist's fabricated yet more logical and factual arguments. I guess the film was trying to showcase the failure of morality in the face of a flawed and corrupt legal system, but using emotional arguments and appeal to feelings in a courtroom setting makes a pure mockery of your own position, which is ironically a microcosm for the entire film, I would say. It gets so bad that while the closing statement of the criminal lawyer is to listen to facts and logic and science, the closing statement from Tapasi Pannu's character is about, look at the example we are setting for the next generation. What about the girl in some other state who had the same thing happen to her, or some minor in some other state, or the street kids who might face this on a daily basis? I mean, you don't have to be a master of logic to call out all the whataboutisms and strawman arguments that Tapasi has presented, but the film expects us to fall for the sentimental arguments like we were born yesterday. And finally, I don't want to get into any spoilers, but the main plot concludes with a tonal whiplash completely counter to the message that the film was trying to convey. And on a personal note, and behalf of all Keralites, can Bollywood please stop fetishizing Kerala women? It's starting to feel like a pattern at this point. Anyway, to conclude, should you watch this film? Yes and no. Like I went in length, this film had a lot of potential, but it is bogged down by the weight of its own ideological aspirations. The film is worth watching for the Vigilante side plot alone, but that would mean trudging through the sludge of its own preachy main plot. If you're okay with that, then I'll say go watch it in the theaters. It's an okay to a good time if you do, but for the others, I'll say just wait for the OTT. So that is it. Like I mentioned previously, I'm not exactly a political pundit, so if you find any flaw or a logical mishap in any of my arguments, then please feel free to mention them in the comments. We can debate it over there. So until next time, this is the Indian Movie Critic signing off. Bye.